Machine here, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel. 20-minute video for 2 minutes worth of content. Gold.
As you say, you actually did play in mouse spots when it was still in theory a German team briefly. Now, I know that karrigan was there too, but as far as I know, karrigan already speaks German, right? Did you speak German? Were you communicating in English? What was the situation there?
I was tough. It was very tough, I think. And also because you had Fatih, kjaerbye. He was not like Ave.
He's pretty harsh, put it that way. I've heard like he's the guy where if you fuck up a smoke, he goes mad, right?
Yes, he was crazy in a good way. I mean, he's I think a lot of the players who have played under him have enjoyed having him as a coach, and also the IGL. I know karrigan really was a big fan of him because he's a hard in-game leader, but he was also very fair and was really good at also rewarding his players for all the good things, but he would definitely let you know if you did something bad, where Ave would take his time, right. Put it in and maybe, take your side, or spend 5 minutes explaining why, before he actually came to the point saying that you missed your smoke outside on you, or whatever it is. It was a tough period because I didn't understand the language. I understood, buzzwords, buzzwords, but it was just, I was the only Dane there, or the only Dane who couldn't speak German. So I had my friendship with karrigan, but it was a difficult time. And I think I also started. I think I started on my university there, so it was right. it was a difficult time. And then at the end, I don't know if I think I decided to leave or if they benched me. I don't remember, to be honest.
Because that was the thing I was going to ask, was obviously it didn't last very long, and I understand why. It's like a weird mix. At the time, if people don't know, people didn't make international lineups. Like, it was already weird enough. You did the Norwegian-Danish one I told you about before. So the question I had was, I mean, you sort of answered it there, but it's like, was there a world where if that had gone awesome, that would have just been your new team, and potentially if CSGO had launched and all that, you would have just been a player in CSGO for mouse?
I don't think. No, I mean, it's tough to say. Of course, if we were just popping off and I started, playing up to my level, I think I took a big dip there in terms of my individual level, and also maybe my commitment as well. It was not 100%, as I said before, but I think after trying CSGO in New York, they had this show match, Europe versus the US. I swore to myself that if this is the game, I will never spend 12 hours a day trying to learn this game.
Classic,
it was too bad of a game, and I lost all my motivation when I saw the game came out, and it was just a shit, to be honest. And I was like, I'm in the middle of my studies. And I knew if I liked the game, I knew I would have to spend, 8 to 12 hours a day, playing it, because if people think now there's a big difference from CSGO to CS2, they should have tried it back then, because that was I think it was even a little bit more easy for the Source guys, because it kind of reminded at least from my side of things. And that was also why I made the famous tweet, it was at that time. And hadn't they fixed the game and also including all, with implementing all the skins and, prolonging investing into esports, I still felt that 1.6 would have been better, bigger, whatever I said in that tweet.
By the way, as you say, right, it's a funny meme when people say, like, it's a funny story now, it looks bad with no context. If you actually had the context that you say, it's actually pretty understandable. And in fact, a lot of people in the scene, like I always tell people, back then, ESL even just came out publicly and told us all. They're not even putting it in the Extreme Masters. Like, we were on, like, that's why it was EMS1 when it was kind of ETS, if you remember. Like, we were on, like, the second, like, sort of like the little kids league, as it were. Like, everyone back then thought the game was going to die and it was never going to take off. The problem is, though, obviously now it sounds ridiculous because you won the most majors ever in it and played until the end of the game, so it just seems ridiculous now, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And it was just, I think it came out of frustration, and just for me to just say, I hate this game and I want to continue playing 1.6, because at that time I felt like inside of me, we're just going to do like we did with Source, a new game comes in and we're just going to continue playing 1.6. Yes. And I was like looking to all my 1.6 buddy and say, hey, let's continue, and they were like, no, we're gonna switch to CSGO. And I was like, what the hell, I'm alone this time. And it was just, I think I just at that time I just hoped that let's just continue like in all good old days. But yes, they definitely improved the game, and of course it became bigger, but it also had some cosmetic and also gameplay wise some help from Valve, and I think also the whole skins things played a
for sure
big role.
No one could predict that. Yeah, of course.
No.
By the way, obviously, I need to get your side of this, right? So there's a story people might vaguely know that in like 2015, I think it was, mTw was supposed to come back. Literally, the old lineup, or the one with Trace, Minette, etc., was supposed to come back for real in CSGO and become pro. And I've heard the story, like initially there was supposed to be funding and it was all going to happen and people started playing. Now, the thing is, when I did my interview, I think it was maybe the one with Trace, I think he was quite honest and even said like it was probably a bad idea and you should never have done it or whatever. Did it actually seem at the time like this might work though? Like we could actually bring everyone back, even though essentially no one was playing at the time, and we could really go pro? Like, was it actually like a real thing that was going to happen, you think?
I think we all missed playing. I think from 12 to 14, 15, I didn't follow any CS whatsoever. I was like completely shut off. It was not until I one day in I think you have that in the UK as well. Good morning UK, good morning Denmark. A TV show in the morning, that I saw Device in the studio talking about how he just bought a Mercedes-Benz, which was total bullshit.
Okay.
He still to this day doesn't have a driver's license, so he didn't buy shit. But it was just, back then it was just,
it's good PR. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly. They were just trying to, build this big narrative about, now you can actually make money off. And, I've done so many interviews with you back in the days. I've always tried to seem professional in my contract, sure. Respecting being a role model, and it was just because you knew one day this game is going to be big. And for me to just seeing this, Good Morning Denmark show with Device, just hearing that he could now live of it, and it was a good salary, and I was like here with, my wife was pregnant with my firstborn child, and it was just I need to go back. But I remember she got crazy, and I had a student job. I was just about to start on my master's degree, and I had this student job. They were really fond of me. They have offered me a full-time position, and I came back one day and say I'm gonna go back to Counter-Strike, and she was like, "No way, you're gonna do that. You have a good job. It's in our hometown. You don't have to travel, to Copenhagen. You'll sit in traffic every day. We're gonna have our first son, and you can't do that." And I was like, I don't want to miss this. And so what happened was that I think I got contacted, or some of us got contacted by some dude from mTw who said that he had this team who wanted to look for some players. They were super interested in getting us marketing-wise, big names in 1.6 coming back. We would get a higher salary than we got in our prime days in mTw, probably just 500 more than what we got then. And I think, it was, we had to stream on the streaming platform Asubu, I think it was called, and it was total bullshit. But at that time when I started watching, I still had this impression that people were making so many mistakes. People were not playing the game properly. They were making over-peaking, re-peaking. They were not playing, structured. And coming from the whole mTw days, I felt like, hey, if we just get our aim, started, we can actually compete here. And that was something that we all actually felt just until we started practicing and we saw how much we got destroyed.
Everyone shot you in the head, right? Sure.
Yes, and then I think at that time, I think we tried it twice, if I don't remember, if I remember correctly. Or I was a coach at Dignitas as well. I think I've been a coach at Dignitas for, I went to the major in Cluj.
With the end of 2015, I think,
WEMP. Yes, and then at the end of 2015, we started this project, I think. And then after that, we could see 14 days after practicing, it was no good. And then, karrigan in December came to me and said, if I wanted to be the coach of their new project, which was Astralis.
Yes. I wanted to actually ask a little bit, because everyone forgets that you actually coached Dignitas, which, to be clear, is not the Dignitas that years earlier the Astralis guys were. This was the one with MSL and AZ and the people, probably everyone at kjaerbye, people that they know, right? I actually want to ask you, because it's a bit bizarre, because everyone obviously only associates you with Astralis, but this was the first year, if people remember, where MSL sort of actually became good as an IGL. He sort of embraced the role, he put his time in, and he started to have results. What was it like to work with MSL? Who was this guy?
I was actually very impressed by MSL in Dignitas. I think he was a fair leader. He was extremely hardworking. Obviously, his individual level was not that good. I think it was good when he started AWPing, and he had that period where he was actually, famously known for beating us in the grand final at WEM and Masters. But but I think it was the right move for him to go off. But as a rifler, he was really poor, unfortunately. But because he was actually a really smart head when it came to Counter-Strike, and I would say, for me, coming back after 3 years off and in an entirely new game, I actually learned a lot from him the first 4 or 5 months when I came back. So I had good experience with him, but it was just, unfortunately, it was only AC who knew how to kill people at that time. He was the only one performing on the team. There were some people in the team who was also a bit toxic, I would say.
All I'll say is look up on Wikipedia. You could guess who, guys.
Yeah, exactly. He's an analyst today.
There you go. Okay, that's enough clues.
Exactly.
That's enough clues.
Yeah.
Right.
But he knew, and I've talked with him afterwards.
Sure.
And it's no big deal. I mean, he was not that old back then, and it was a tough time. And then I saw this bright diamond in kjaerbye, who I also connected with and worked with later on in Astralis. So. But yeah, nothing bad to say about him himself. He was a good IGL, in my opinion, at least at that time.
Because this is something I want to ask. A lot of people don't make that connection of you and kjaerbye were together in Dignitas. And then it wasn't that long into Astralis where you became the coach of them. That was the big move. kjaerbye went out and kjaerbye came in from Dignitas. What was the vision at the time? Because if people don't know, it wasn't really until the Glaive lineup that obviously the team got to the absolute top again. Like initially when kjaerbye came in the lineup, I remember like he was mega on Dignitas, but then it seemed like, I don't know what his role was initially, but it was a bit confused. And then the team obviously had like sort of a mini slump, which to be fair, still meant go to the playoffs and all that sort of stuff. It just didn't mean win the tournament anymore. So what was it like bringing kjaerbye in, and what was the vision for what he was going to do in Astralis?
I think back then I wasn't paying too much attention to roles, and that was an issue that I've mistakenly created in Astralis. You had dupreeh and kjaerbye on pretty much the same roles, but at that time my focus was just to get rid of kjaerbye, because I think even though I liked René as a person, I think he was not in his best days. He was getting frustrated. The players were afraid of him. Not saying that for me, I think he was actually fine. He was staying his issue, maybe a little bit too much. The guy, with all the hindsight cleverness. I can't remember the expression for it, but he was stating his opinion, and I just don't felt that the team was ready to have that straightforward, directness.
He's a bit too spicy, right?
Yes, and for me it was just you had basically a whole team that didn't want to continue playing with him, and then you had this, kjaerbye was doing really well in Dignitas, and he was young, up and coming. He was good, I really enjoyed coaching him in my time in Dignitas. He was a very easy guy, when you've kind of like a mini WEMP in some sense. Nothing bad to say about this guy. And yeah, I brought him in, but unfortunately, back then we didn't focus too much on it. But you had suddenly dupreeh and kjaerbye on the same roles, which then turned out to be an issue later on. And then the whole thing with karrigan, it was just clash of styles pretty much. I wanted to approach, adopt the mTw way of playing, the structured way, and Finn wanted to, play this explosive, creative way of playing, and that just didn't, go well together. And I think the rest of the team they preferred my way of playing the game. And when I had my talks with Glaive and also I think Device also talked about Glaive could be a really good player instead of karrigan, and then me and Glaive just saw eye to eye how we should play the game pretty much.
By the way, I've got an obvious question to ask you, but I waited until this point in the interview. Even though, like I say, in mTw, there were also years where you had a lot of times you were in the final or the semi-final, you didn't win, and the other team sometimes were having the better side of the rivalry. In Astralis, I can tell you, when I used to talk to these players, like, I don't know if it was like this in mTw, is what I'm going to ask, which is, they were just in denial that there was such a thing as choking, dude. Like, I get it on some level. First of all, it is kind of a bit whack if you're someone in a team and then someone outside of the team team just looks at the result and just goes, you obviously choked. Like, that gets annoying after a while. You just think, what the fuck do you know? Like, maybe I didn't. Maybe, I made the wrong read, or I've missed the shot or something. Right? There's a lot of reasons people can give as to why it's not the case. But for me, the problem is when it becomes a big trend, like you lose to the same opponent, or it's always in the finals, or you're the favourite and you look awesome in the semi one day, but then you're half as good in the to me, eventually something's going on there. Whether it's like choking, whether it's, I don't know, performance anxiety, some sort of psychological thing. There's a reason why this became a big narrative. Do you think actually you yourself, were you in denial of it around this time when you guys still did used to lose? Did you think it was nonsense? Did you know it was a problem?
I would say I never really got to experience that, choking part, because to be fair, when I joined, we suddenly started performing even worse, and we okay. made the because I wanted to switch up a little bit, and I wanted to investigate to see, okay, how can we improve this team and what is going on, and try to have more talks with them. And I think that kind of did something to the team. So we actually started dipping. We never got to, we also lost to, famously on home soil to Heroic in the Danish tournament.
Sure.
Because we were like, okay, let's just take a step back and then win a Danish tournament, and then we can go on from that.
Classic.
And then we do that, and we just came from a boot camp just to win it. And we went to the tournament, I remember it was in Fyn, and we lose to Heroic, with Freeze, Muddy, Glaive, and all these guys. And then I called them straight to a boot camp again, because back then it was that was the only thing I knew. If we lose, okay, we have to play more. And it just became a big mess. I started complaining, started to threatening to leave, and I was like, holy shit, I'm going to get fired soon. And then that was where, I had my talks with Astralis, and we said, okay, Danny, he needs like full authority over the team. And that's where we start, benching players and getting rid of them to build, the new Astralis. But yeah. But what was your answer?
It was about choking, but you sort of
yes.
went around it. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, and then after that we got Glaive, and then things just immediately started turning better. And so I just, when I joined, we just played like shit, and then we went immediately to win tournaments. So I never really got that, where I've seen the team playing super well in group stage, destroying a team in quarterfinals, and then just playing like shit in the semifinal. I never really got to experience that.
By the way, since you reference it here, one thing I also did want to ask about is, that was famously, people don't know, that was how it was even officially announced, was when karrigan was benched in Astralis. It wasn't like normal, like, the org just kicks you, or the players just like mutiny. You actually, it was announced like Zonic chose to bench karrigan, like that was your choice, right? If people don't know, that's for 2016, that's an enormous amount of power. Like, there's orgs I know now that barely give the coach that sort of say, maybe he can choose between two players or something. So this was a big deal, like it was something you fought for?
I fought for the authority, but also Astralis wanted me to have that authority. Right. I think already from back then, they really wanted, to have this more professional approach, being a professional sports team, We even started working with Mia, our sports psychologist. She came in around, September, October 16, if I remember correctly. So the things have started to shape up. But I would say it was not just my call. I think it was also for Astralis to say the coach is there. But eventually it was my decision, but it was something everyone was on board with, because the way that things turned out with karrigan in the fashion that they did, I mean, there was no turning back. Not to go into details or anything, but it was too much. But it ultimately was me pressing the button. But if I didn't do it, the players would definitely have done it straight after.
How good actually was this era of karrigan? Obviously, it's a long time ago now. It's like 7 years ago, and I'm sure he's changed since. What was he like at the time? Like, was he actually a good in-game leader? Was it just a mismatch with the team? What was the problem?
He was. I think karrigan has always been underrated as an IGL, and he has definitely improved since my time with him in Astralis. I would also say the game has also shifted into his way of playing a bit more. But he has definitely developed. What was the big issue with Finn back then was he had these crazy super tactics. He was extremely creative, but it was just the correlation from practice into official games. I mean, we could have practiced a strat or a whole playbook for quite some time, and then the official came and we had 3 or 4 new strats that we had to go through just for that specific match. And then for me, it was just a bit too much. And then there was also, the whole communication. He was very stressful. could, mid-round, start screaming, and people couldn't really follow his plan. And I think at that time it was, a lot of people say, about karrigan that he's extremely good for a certain period of time with the team, and then, the time comes where he loses the team in some sense, and where they start disbelieving in him, and he's not that type of leader who's just say, hey, now you better fucking listen to me, and he loses a little bit of confidence himself, and I think he has moved a lot. I really don't want to try and paint a wrong picture of the karrigan we have today, because he's totally different. But back then it was a guy who also lacked a little bit of confidence himself, and it didn't take too many, questions around him from his teammates or from me to have him lose his confidence totally. And that was, the sad part of my time with him in Astralis towards the end, because he has always had a really smart head when it comes to, being creative, creating new strats, working hard. It's always been spotless.
As you say, because in the year when you were with Astralis, they had less success than when they were in TSM, and obviously it's a brand new organization, like had big expectations. Was there a real world, do you think, where like maybe you just get fired that first year and there aren't any of these majors? We don't have this awesome group. Was that possible, do you think?
I definitely got nervous towards the end. When you hit like August, September. It's been 9 months total shit, to be honest. It was difficult. You started having those thoughts, but I also felt like we need to, because I felt like the team was, yes, they were TSM, they were used to going to semifinals and all these things, but I also think that they kind of hit their peak, and I think they would never, unless we really got to clean up stuff, it would just go in one direction, and that was down, because they were. A bit fortunate, with hitting those big runs to some extent, but there was something fundamentally wrong with the team by them not performing when it really matters. I remember in Cluj, everyone was talking about they were the big favorites, and then they fucked it up again somehow. And yeah, it was tough, and you started questioning yourself a little bit. Like, you came in, and then you finally, you had the courage to actually make some decisions, and it didn't turn out exactly how you wanted it to. But I'm just happy that they had the confidence in me, and sticking with me throughout the entire year. And then we started off by winning, I think, the first tournament of the team, at least Astralis, the ECS in LA, if I remember correctly, at the end of 16, and then obviously the major 1 month later.
Right, people might know gjaerbye as an in-game leader, even way back when he was at the beginning of CSGO, was more of like a tactical in-game leader. But one thing I want to ask you, because it's kind of another thing we've discussed with these bigger periods of 1.6 and CSGO, is actually at the time in CSGO, if you think about the teams that were on top, it wasn't about super structured play back then. It wasn't about like tactics and things like that. It was like the Brazilians just being good at the end of the round, or the Swedes doing this classic Swedish defaults with everyone just fragging out and doing crazy flusher moves and Olaf-Meister pushes. But like, actually, the idea at the time, because funny enough, people like MSL used to get flamed for it, was like sort of an old, outdated way of playing the game, to do tactics and have set things and the lineups and stuff. So, do you feel as though, like, did you always have this notion that the game could be played that way in CSGO? Did you lock into the timing? Because it seems like it was your team that made everyone go the opposite way and decide everyone had to do. Like, I've heard at the end, even Team Liquid was trying to play like Astralis. Like, everyone just flipped that and decided it was the best way. So, were you aware that this was how the game could be played? Do you agree? Do you think the scene had gone the other way?
I felt like as I said before, I was definitely disappointed when I came back, to see the game, and I saw these big games in the major. And maybe I started watching the Fnatic game with JW and Flush. I was like, what the hell are you doing? You have the AWP mate. So, why are you just running around shotgun using it? And we also talked. I had talked with MJE, and you get a kill, you hide, and obviously you couldn't do it in the same way 1.6 because it was a Pegasus advantage game. Yes. You could just sit and hide and wait, behind an angle, which was Trace's like really strength when it came to 1.6. Maybe also why he had some issues in CSGO, but I definitely felt like on the tactical side it was, and I even had issues convincing my own players in Astralis that can't we peek here and try and convince them that this was the wrong play. And I had got into some fights with some of the players, regarding those things that I was like, why are you not playing time? Yeah, because of this and that. And it was just, I was really surprised in a negative way that, the game hadn't progressed more, I would say, from that. I actually felt that it has gone backwards from 1.6, but you also had all these, I never followed source on. So maybe it was the mix of two scenes coming together that made it, but I felt like, it was, tactically wise, it was a lot worse than what it was at the end of 1.6.
I feel like what you just said there would probably shock some people, the idea that like even Astralis players like disagreed initially. But I'll tell you a very brief story and you'll immediately know what I'm talking about when I say this, right? There's a story that Khan once told me in an interview where he said that when he had that player, Gox, the Swedish player, who, if you remember, was like really skilled, but he was a bit of like, he was kind of like a jock. He was just one of those people just like, fuck it, I'll shot him, I'm better than or whatever. Like, he wasn't like a really cerebral player. He told me a story where he had an argument with him when they were in the same team. And he told him the same thing you're saying. Like, it was like a scenario when you're in a 1v1 and you could just like use the bomb, like you have the bomb planted and make the CT come to you and then you shoot him, right? But instead Gox did like the classic move where you even though you don't have it, you just do like a wide swing and then he killed the guy, right? So Khan was telling him like, look, I know you won, but like don't do that, because in the future, like if you just play safe, basically, like you either win from time or you get him in a bad situation. And the Gox guy sort of told him like, nah, I'm pretty sure I just win most of the time anyway. And then Khan was trying to be reasonable, so he was like, oh, I'm sure you probably win like let's say 70% of the time. And he goes, no, more like 95%. And Khan was like, well, look, don't be ridiculous. Obviously, you don't win the A1, but that's how star players really did think back then. Like, dude, I won't say names, but I think there's some star players today think that way. Like, they don't necessarily see the bigger picture, right? It's you have to get them to buy in, because the reason I set this up is I don't think people understand. You weren't just a coach in the sense of like, right, go to practice, guys. You actually like had the vision for how to play the game, right?
Yeah, and I think you're spot on as well with today. I mean, I've had issues in my previous two teams, both in Astralis and Vitality, like small things such as you win pistol round, you win the second round, they force buy, and then they have a full eco. The whole thing about, okay, if we plan B and Mirage, you have one guy go kitchen, you have maybe three guys who is disciplined going back to BFs because we have one guy in BFs already. And then you had this one guy in kitchen just waiting with his only AK or whatever, sure, and just dying to a USP. And it's just, I've had these talks so many times, and for me, it's just pointless. I can see the whole thing. You have a Mag 10, just go out and get some kills or whatever it is. But I've also been a little bit convinced, because I remember also having, I think it was with Device, I was like, there's no need for you to hunt there. And he was like, yeah, but I want to gain confidence. Yeah, but you're killing USPs. Okay. How are you getting confidence? Yeah, but it's just, on the scoreboard. I was like, wow. That was really surprising. Okay,
right. That's like a different mentality for you.
Yes, but that was very different, because I used to come from the whole, team first, nothing else. And that was a big surprise to me. But I would also say, I can learn as well. And I definitely can see, but the whole thing, everybody's talking stats, you need one of these players to, it has to be his focus point. How is my stats? I need to get into top 20 of HLTV or top 10 or top 5 or whatever it is, depending on who you're talking to. But that is important. And it's like with football, you have Cristiano Ronaldo looking into, okay, how many goals can I score this season? And it doesn't really, team still comes first, but it's as on an equal basis. And I think that what makes players good as well. And then you need a guy also to just sacrifice, and that's another trait that you need in a team. So yeah.
In this actual first year you were in Astralis, I remember actually, because obviously I knew him at the time, this was actually when Device was in the weird period in his career where that was the first year he was like the primary AWP all the time. If people don't know, before that he was like the hybrid AWP, but it was more like based on the map, or if he felt like it, I think at the time. I know this year under karrigan, he tried to just be like permanent AWP, basically. It wasn't quite like later with the gla1ve lineup, but at the same time, like he was the star player. He was still really good. Like, and I actually think this year, because the team didn't do so good, people forget, dude, Device was really good in 2016. I remember at the end of the year, right before the major coming into 2017 where you won, I think he might even have been the best player in the world. Like, he looked fucking amazing. So what was it like to work with him in that sense? Because obviously it is like we give the analogy of the Sunde example. He wasn't a traditional AWPer himself. Like, he had to shift over. But it seems like eventually, like the joke is at the end of CSGO, most people now would say, if you talk about like what a sniper does, not just killing people like Simple and Zebu do, if you talk about how someone snipes, most people now would say Device is probably the best AWPer ever. Like, it actually seems by the end that role just fits him. So what was it like when he first took this role?
Yes, I remember that was also one of the talks that we had in 16. I was saying that, to the whole team that I think we need to just have one AWPer. I mean, we had kjaerbye on those two, we had karrigan on Mirage, and we had Device on all the other maps. And depending on the map pool and depending on the veto, karrigan might play up every third week or whatever it is.
Sure.
And that was just for me. That was just a no-go. So I made the Device full AWPing, and then we started becoming a little bit worse on those two because Device needed to find his ground hole on that map, and you had kjaerbye he was extremely fucking good on that map
Sure.
with the AWP. So you started to having some questions, but eventually it was the right decision, and I mean I've always said by far the best player I've ever had, coached or played with is Saibu. But the best student is definitely Device.
Right.
Device is by far the hardest working player when it comes to being a star player, analyzing his opponents, finding different ways of playing, looking for inspiration. I remember in 16, 17 he was looking at Fallen demos all the time because he was the name. And then even the young players, I'm sure he's been looking at play like some Pius, even though Device has a lot more, pedigree when it comes to that. I mean, he's not afraid to look at, hey, what is the new guys doing? And it's just, he is by far the best student, analyzing his opponents, always focusing. And I remember, preparing, it was always a joy, handing over my report and then having Device, oh, can you take a look at this next time? I need to know this about the AWPer. And with Saibu, you don't get that at all. You just get a player who is just gifted in so many other levels where his sense for the game, where I actually to one point in Vitality I was afraid that I was touching something that I shouldn't touch, because I kind of wanted him to be a little bit more like, imagine what his level could be.
Sure.
If he actually started working just as hard as Device, and that was very, very triggering for me to actually figure out what to do in that sense, because I didn't want to disturb him, but because he was so good. But for me, yeah, Device by far the best student that I've had when it comes to the star positions.
Because even though I'm sure now people have seen it in the modern Astralis, which is almost nothing like yours, and he obviously had that year in NIP where at least initially he was fragging out. People used to do that stupid thing where when Astralis was winning, they were like, oh, the thing about Device is like he's good, but he's like a system AWPer. And I used to be like, what system? Like, if you watch what he's doing, it's obvious no one, like, Glaive isn't calling all his movements on the map. Like, like you say, he's clearly like, watch the demos. He has his own idea of what he's going to. Well, how do you use a player like that? Because it seems like on the one hand, it could be amazing, like you can do anything. But at the same time, it's not as simple as like a Kenny S style. You do just go to the same spot every round and shoot everyone. So what's the challenges and what are the benefits of having a player like Device in that sense?
I mean, you are very much depending on him calling a lot as well. He was calling so many things on CT side, especially. I want to peek here, and Glaive was just, yeah, you go ahead, mate. Who can help him? We talked about having a wingman towards him. So let's say he's on short Inferno. Magisk would be on apps, holding apps, but as soon as Device shoots the guy in boiler, and let's say a T's want to trade him. Magisk swings out from apps, or from balcony holding short for him, so he gets a safe route away. Then Device would go B and he would go back, and sometimes he would switch positions, sometimes he wouldn't. Then he would look at his own game, saying, "Okay, last game I whenever I got a kill on A Inferno, I went to B. This time I'm gonna stay," And he was like very methodical in his way of playing, analyzing himself, when to do what, how much did he do that before. And nowadays, when you watch games, you watch just as much yourself, what you did in the last couple of games, than you watch your opponents.
Right.
It's much more tricky nowadays to prepare because people are doing that. And I think for Device was one of the few players who actually did that on a regular basis, at least when it comes to his own game, analyzing himself.
One thing you said that was very interesting earlier, and it's an obvious comparison. You used the example of dupreeh, because if people don't know, dupreeh and kjaerbye sort of played the same role, at least at this era. And obviously, if you look at the success of the team, you essentially swapped it, right? Like kjaerbye sort of took dupreeh's roles, and then people remember he became the major MVP, and then dupreeh's numbers went down a bit. And then afterwards, when the lineup changed to Omega's coming in, dupreeh sort of took back the entry roles, I'm guessing. Something like that, right? One thing you said earlier that was quite curious, though, but it's very famous in CS, is when I've done a lot of these videos over the years, videos where I'm trying to like explain concepts to casual fans, I always tell people like the idea of roles is usually more like that. It's more like if someone has never played CS, if I can really quickly explain to them, this guy's more like on the entry side of it, this guy's going to hang back a bit and cover the back. If I explain that, they're going to understand it simply. But it's not the case. It's not like football. You don't have to have 2 strikers. You don't have to have an X number of defenders. Obviously, there's a lot of freedom. Were you someone where you alluded to it earlier? Did you just not see CS this way? You just thought it was a bunch of players and you figure it out each time yourself, or you do it by map or something? You didn't see the game as roles?
I think I did, but not to that extent. I think it was just maybe that. Oh yeah, but they can just share it a little bit. I didn't.
Right.
I don't think I took it that seriously or that in that context. But because I could really see with dupreeh that his numbers got down, and he didn't like playing underground and on overpass, for example. I remember he was playing there, and that was a big issue for him. And back then I was just like, yeah, but you're just you can call someone to come with you underground. You take underground, then you come up, and then it's all good. It doesn't matter if you're entry or whatever. You just go to get some frags, because that was maybe the 1.6 way. You didn't have that many aggressive CTs at all, and it was not that, it was not that clear for me how important that was. And I think it's become extremely important now, and it's also been one of my, I need to have the role in place. It doesn't matter if I have 5 of the best players. There's so many layers to it. You need to have, look into age. You need to look into how many things have people won. From my time in Astralis, I mean, to some extent, you might not feel like you need to change a player, but you need to change a player because you have 4 or 5 players who have won pretty much everything, and they have no, spark in them, and you need to, to restart that. And yeah, roles as well. I mean, we also saw it with Vitality, mTw and dupreeh playing the same roles. And then you had dupreeh to play in front of door, and it was a trial period with mTw, and we went after a different player. I can say that, but unfortunately he declined back when I joined Vitality, and then it was just okay. Let's just give it 6 months and see how it goes. And then we went for Spinks.
Along those lines, though, since we're on the topic of dupreeh, can you give us some thoughts about what changed in Vitality? Because I heard some story from Apex that was along the lines of, like, basically maybe at one point in time they were trying to have like dupreeh be Astralis dupreeh and do his old roles and stuff. It switched up towards the end, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to different styles of calling. I don't think you can say that. A guy like Apex, he's the guy who likes to set up his teammates, flashing for them, setting them up, having them run, going in. Where a player like Snappy, karrigan maybe is one of the guys who's sacrificing more, going in first. And it's because Apex is really good with nades as well. And I think what we wanted, what we needed on our team to set up, the star players, Spinks and ZywOo, was that you needed this guy who can just go all in, taking the space. You're most likely going to die, but you give the info to ZywOo, he's going to trade you, and he's going to kill one more else, and then we get the bomb side, and then we're in a good situation, 3v3, that we will win 7 out of 10 times. And mathematically, we should win, more games than we lose, and blah, blah, blah. And that was difficult, because that was not how we used dupreeh in Astralis. In Astralis, he was not really an entry or an opener. He was just, having those positions, and then he had more freedom than the rest, but he was, part of a system where we would, play the old classic way. You take some map control, you try and squeeze them, and then you end up going somewhere, maybe you do a fake, and that's it. And the CTs will just wait for us to do whatever the fuck we wanted. But here he had to, take more space, take more risk, and I think it also how you are playing the game more nowadays. We did a lot in Vitality, I would say, but it is like that on overpass. The A player is T. Sometimes you just have to gamble. You're just gonna sneak banana, and you hope that the orb is not holding. And if he's not, then you probably run around. If he is, too bad. You get the info, and then we can decide to make another decision. But that was not what dupreeh was used to. But he definitely, I would say in 23, he definitely caught up, and he played way better than I expected, because it was tough for him to just, to some extent become a what do you call it, a meat cannon or whatever it is, like just
the bait.
cannon,
sure.
Yeah, cannon fodder,
Yes.
because that was what it for him looked like.
Yeah.
But it was also for me to have a lot of conversations with him, because I knew that Peter at least before Katowice this year, we had a long talk. He was seeing himself as this, star rifler from Astralis. He had to put up good numbers. He's still a good player. And I had some long talks where I really tried to convince him that, Peter, that is not your role anymore. You're not a star player of this team. You have Spinks and you have Sabu. This is how we are building the team. You need to contribute with your experience, the way you are off the server, being a good teammate. I remember Spinks after the major came, and he said that he loved every day, talking to dupreeh before the games, because dupreeh was like, just seemed so convinced that it just affected Spinks in a different way. You had the game in Rio against Cloud9. Sabu and Spinks didn't show up in an important game. You had dupreeh going absolutely crazy. And that's where I need you. Like, I need you in those, big games where one of our main guys have a rough game, where you're just like, hey, I'm going to rely on my experience. Just like we have in football. You have experienced players. You're not just going to go after 11, 19-year-olds who's just the fastest and the biggest or whatever. You need to have that mixture of experience. And I think after that, we had that talk. He acknowledged that he was not just, performing because he was, hitting a brick wall all the time. Whenever he had a bad game, he was just getting more and more frustrated. And that was hindering his at least my perception of his role in Vitality, which was not the same as in Astralis.
The tough thing as well, because this to me ties into like what I asked you about getting to bench karrigan at the beginning of the Astralis project. Like, to me, I think there are most coaches, almost every coach in my opinion, would never make that roster move you made after winning the major. I know like he didn't win the blast after, but he was still in the finals. Like almost everyone else, the joke even would be Zonic, like just winning that major would normally have bought dupreeh like 6 more months in any other team, because you just won the major, you just won all the big tournaments. Like everyone's going to give you a chance. And also it just looks really bad, like sort of to fans, like we won, guys, but we're gonna have to kick him, I'm afraid. Like, that's a pretty ballsy move though, but I will say that is much more in line with what I think like great coaches in like football do, for example. Even if you win the championship, like the other teams are all making their changes. They're all going to try and be number one. Sometimes you have to make a really brutal cut like this. And in this case, it must have been hard, not just because of like he was your old player from Astralis, but he also is a player where I can understand why he might think he's still good, because he had insane longevity in CSGO. The guy really was good for like 8 years or something crazy. So I can see why he probably thinks he can still get back to the top. So can you just give me some thoughts? Like, how do you even go about cutting someone like that when you've just won the world championship? That must be the craziest conversation you ever have to have, right?
It was brutal. To be honest, I was in Disneyland with my Disney World with my kids. It was because we couldn't let Peter know because of the signing of Flames, and I didn't want to tell Peter you're benched, and then he's not benched because we're not going to get Flames after all. And that was a decision made, and it was pouring, raining, and I was just standing here, and I had to do the talk because I really tried everything I could to let him know before we left, Washington, because I really wanted to say it face to face. But I also felt that as soon as it was final, he had to know it. And yeah, it was a shit conversation, to be honest. And it was very difficult for me because I also have a strong personal relationship with Peter. But I think you cannot just evaluate that, okay, yes, we won the major, but you need to look at it as how has the last year been with Vitality? I think we got the absolute maximum out of Peter in the state that he was in back then. It's good to see him putting up good numbers. Shout out to him in CS2. But I think that was the maximum that we could get out of Peter for that team. I think if you look at the whole year, it's been ups and downs. Yes, we won the major. It's a big thing. But you also need to look in the fashion that we did it. I mean, barely 1 or 2 maps during the entire tournament was convincing, in my opinion. It could have easily gone the other way around. Not saying anything that was Peter's fault, but it was just, let's not get blind, I would say, by the performance. Let's just look at it not from a major perspective, but also, giving everything into consideration. Vitality didn't have much money to spend on transfers. We got this opportunity with a player, again, same role, 10 years younger.
No buyout, right?
No buyout, yes, exactly. He was free, and also, I had some talks with dupreeh, asking about his future, what he was thinking, and he said that he would at least want to, take the major in Copenhagen as well. And for me, it was just, but then what about after? if we can't, afford to get a new player in, I mean, now is the time if you want to make the change. And it was just when you put all those things combined and not just looking at the major result and just saying, yeah, because I think to some point, I think one of my mistakes was keeping the Astralis lineup a bit too long, at least for one of the players, and it was difficult because the weak friendship we also had in this lineup, and there were some contractual things with our agent / Astralis that made us more, the commitment between the players and me more complicated, I would say. So it was more difficult for me to bench a player, but in hindsight, I think that was also one thing where we could have maybe extended the period with the roster if we made a change a little bit before. And I kind of wanted to, I kind of learned from that, and yeah, that was the reason for my decision.
When you guys won that first major and beat Virtus Pro and won the ELEAGUE Atlanta major, I've got a different way to ask you this question from any other way you've ever been asked. Because normally it's always billed as like, this is like the start of the Astralis dynasty and we won the first major and, it was epic and the comeback. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you the question that I was asked quite annoyingly by some of my friends that were in Virtus Pro that tried to like corner me after the event. I won't say which names, where, as you can imagine, they're a bit spicy when they've had a few drinks, Sonic. They kept telling me, I have to admit to them right now, that it was a fluke and that Astralis shouldn't have won, and they should have won either 2 maps. Because remember, Zipnix did that like 1 HP, 1v3 on it. They say it either should have been 2-0 on Overpass, or definitely they had the game won already on train and you guys were just lucky. Like, so my question is, was there luck involved in winning this major?
I don't know if there was luck. I mean, maybe they also choked a little bit. Let's talk about choking, but I think of course there is always some luck, and yes, we could definitely argue that this could have easily been a 2-0, and they should definitely also have won train if it wasn't for Glaive's hero calling in the last 2 rounds, if I remember correctly. And I mean, that's just how it is. I mean, I think we definitely deserve to win the game. Also, when you just look at what we came from a team being known for choking left and right, and then to actually standing in front of that mental beast that you have just been, that the players have been experiencing, and then actually making a comeback instead. I mean, that was phenomenal. But yeah, I mean, it was a Cinderella story for us. I mean, coming into that tournament, if I remember correctly, I think we lost to one of the refresh teams actually in Gotland. I think they were.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yes, I think we lost and we had a horrible start, and it was just a big mess. And then we had Audi as a sponsor in Astralis. Then I wanted to make this whole big thing where we got picked up in Audi cars in front of the host, and all the players were looking at it. And it was just talk about putting pressure on some of the players. So it was a beautiful story. I mean, it was by far the major that means the most, but it's also the first one is always special.
Now, here's the thing. If you win 5 majors in a game, you don't really get to be like, I should have won this one as well. But to me, no one ever talks about the next one after this. The Krakow one. Dude, that was right there. That was on a platter. When you got to the semis, like VP wasn't even supposed to be good and they were on the other side. Immortals were barely even a top team at the time. And then Gambit, like they were all right. But at the time, they weren't a team that was going to win the major. Like, do you ever look back on that one and think like that could have been a major right there, right?
We should have won train if I remember correctly. I think Mo had a good game. Mouz, M-O-U. I think he had a really good game, if I remember correctly. But yeah, and then this whole Zeus speech or whatever it was. I mean, he was. I think he was really underrated in that sense. Being you can talk about being a good IGL, talking about having good strats and all whatnot. But what made Astralis good was also having a great leader outside of the server, and that was what we had with Glaive, and I also think that was what Gambit had with Zeus, because he could fire them up in a different way, and they respected him. And yeah, I mean, it's again one of those games that I can't really remember it to fully detail. Just that was ours to lose, coming from the major in January, and then the losing this one. But I also think it was at the time where Device started to have health
issues, right? Yeah.
Yes. So it was a little bit rough, but we no excuse for that major. We lost it, but yeah, it was starting to show at that time.
By the way, what can you tell me about that particular topic? Because people have already heard it like vaguely through the Astralis PR statements over the years. Like, and obviously the way it was described, like in the year when you guys took some time off and you didn't go to all the events, they made it sound weird. Like he could only travel like so many left around the world or something for like 5 hours. There was some weird like requirement put around it. But if people don't know, as far as I know, he had a very similar thing, right, to kjaerbye, who funnily enough also at the time was in a similar situation when they had these flare-ups where they had essentially like intestinal issues or something. It was actually when they're winning everything, even though the crazy thing is I've been told that illness actually is made worse by stress. Like in theory, you'd think being in a grand final on stage would make it worse. So can you give me some thoughts as someone who was a teammate? Like what was he having to battle with through these years? Because he, like the years when he had it, the worst as far as I know was when you were in the final every year, right? And every single event, and it was like event after event after event. So it must have been very challenging to deal with this health problem, right? From in theory, your star player who's winning the MVP.
It was very much difficult because at one point you had a player who was sick, who was also your star player. I'm all about, treating everyone fairly. So he was, skipping, team walks, skipping breakfast, having all the things because he had, the issue regarding the whole flight thing. I remember watching one of your videos, and I today I don't remember the root cause or the reason or the reason why it was such a bad thing. But I remember getting an answer to it. But I can't remember because I remember you guys were talking about that. That's how can that be an issue? And
there was actually a real reason as to why you couldn't like go a certain direction or time zone or something, right?
I don't know if it was jet lag because so when you're traveling to the east, when you're traveling to China, Australia, I usually get more fucked when it comes to jet lag.
Right. Yes.
When I'm traveling to US, because then you have to. You have to sleep through the plane. When I'm traveling to the US, it's an easier game because I just need to, stay awake for a couple of hours.
Day, right?
Then, yes. And then I go to bed and then I wake up fully fresh like 6 a.m. in the morning. But when you're traveling to the east, I think there were some issues with, maybe it was the jet lag that kick-started, the stomach issues.
Right.
But he was very, very ill in Australia to a point where I got extremely nervous around his health. And then that was it. I also think, now they went to China. Obviously, he's in a much better state now in Astralis. But yeah, it was a big issue for him with the traveling part. And I don't know how today how things kickstarted, but I remember getting an answer that felt solid for me because it was difficult to navigate into being a coach wanting to win, but you also want to give the players rest and. Yeah, it was just it was very difficult to experience that.
Right, I have a weird question for you that goes like this. People always forget, I love to bring this piece of trivia up, people always forget that Magisk wasn't even the first, he was the third choice because it was supposed to be kjaerbye stayed, but obviously then he did that like WWE move where he just on the day of signing was like, I'm in North now or whatever, which was like, what? And then people know the story from that famous like fucking, I think you told it in your book, where Config could have had the gig, but then because he's Config, he had to open his mouth and say the wrong thing and fuck the whole thing up. And so the joke is like, Magisk was like little Magisk, he's like third in line, he just gets to come in. But now everyone knows that's the best lineup ever. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if kjaerbye just didn't leave, if he just stayed? It's an interesting question, right?
I know because it's been very tough for kjaerbye. I've had a lot of talks with him afterwards. And what I actually told him was that it was fine that he did the move because there was a high possibility, looking back at it and, reflecting and I really, tried to, also for his sake, there is a good chance that kjaerbye would have been swapped.
Because of the dupreeh thing with the roles and stuff?
The same year later, yes, because I think role-wise I saw more potential in dupreeh. And I think kjaerbye was not, except for that run at the major where he was really good and he was stepping up, especially in the games where that was destined for us to just fail all the again, and then kept being called chokers. But I think I would have preferred dupreeh over kjaerbye. I'm certain I would have. So I told him that there was a chance that he would have just gone bench 7 months later. So I hope and
so it doesn't haunt him, like he doesn't keep thinking, I could have won all. Right, I see. That's a good point. Yeah. All right, then along similar lines, then what about? Look, it didn't end up happening, but there's a world where Config might have been the 5th player. Listen, that'd be an interesting project for you to work with. Like, if anyone could get through to him, maybe it's you. Maybe you could have got to him.
Yeah, I mean, I think Magisk didn't have the best reputation. Like, the North guys kicked him, even though he was probably the best player on the roster at that time. And I think there was like some socially with matches that they didn't like or they didn't prefer. And for me, I just saw a player, like, he answered so well in all the questions that I had with him. And he was like, you know, back then compared to all the other teams, maybe still to this day, it's a bit much. We did a lot of content in Astralis. And he just answered, I mean, I don't like doing content, but I'm going to do it if the team tells me to do it. And that was just, you know, the way that he replied. And yeah, he can be a bulldog, Magisk. And I also saw that where I can, if I didn't want to solve the problem, just talking about, you know, don't want to make changes all the time. If I didn't want to solve the problem, then I can understand why they wanted to switch him in North. But as soon as you get under his skin and you start talking with him and you start fixing the issues, then I mean, he has been, you know, a great joy to work with Magisk. So Config, I don't know. I mean, he did, as you said, that I wrote, he did poorly, and you know, he was being late.
I mean, if people don't know, the thing he said supposedly was that he just didn't want to do any media, that he was just going to frag in the game, which, as far as I know, especially for an org like Astralis, which is like a smaller org, it's not like Cloud9 or something, like, media's half of your job, right? Like, essentially, he doesn't know it maybe at the time, but that's like the worst possible answer he could have given, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I knew it was a big thing for Astralis as well, and I think I did the question based on something that I've heard. You know, I like to also talk with the previous coaches, and I definitely think that Ave and WEM, they owed me one. You know, when I had that conversation with them, because they just took one of my players and without letting me know, and I think I mean, I don't know if Config actually had worked with North, but anyways, I think for me, it was just, you know, talking with Config. He's a good guy. I actually like him a lot as a person, because I think he has fucked up a lot of times, made stupid career moves, you know, the incident with the Astralis and all these things, blah blah blah. But every time I've talked with him, I actually think he's a nice guy, and he just needs proper coaching, in my opinion. Before he needs someone to actually take care of him and not just ask about in-game stuff, but also make sure he's good outside of the game as well, and being there, because I think that's what he needs just as much as he needs, you know, guidance in the game. But I'm happy I chose Emil.
Is Simple the GOAT for Zonic in CSGO?
When you take everything combined, you know, X factor, you know, star quality, showing up in big games. It really depends how you see it. I mean, then yes. I mean, he is, over the long period of time, he is the GOAT. But when you take into consideration how much you mean to your team, how much have you achieved, how is your work ethics? Yes, you can be talented, but are you also putting up the work? I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that neither Saiwu or Simple is working just as hard as Device, and you can see, you know, being a good teammate as well. As I talked about before, you know, one of the key successes for my time in both Astralis and Vitality has been that we have found this unity around the team that where everyone feels equal, everyone is working hard, and everyone is being there for each other. I think that's, by the end of the day, it is a team game. But yes, you need individual players as well. But yeah, what I'm trying to say here is that officially, Simple is probably the GOAT. I think it's very hard to argue against the amount of things he have done. You know, Saiwu just came a little bit too late in that conversation. I think it would be unfair to give him that already. For me, I think Device, by far from my experience, is in the category. But it is one of those three. But I'm also 100% certain that if Saiwu continues his level, he will be the GOAT in the next iteration of the game.
Because obviously during this time period where Simple's had all the success and been number one was right when your teams were some of the best in the world, obviously Astralis and then now more recently Vitality. So my question would be this, right? Look, I won't say like a stupid, naive question like, how do you shut down Simple? Because it's like Ronaldo or Messi. So like, you don't really shut them down. You just try and make the game harder, obviously. But what is the approach when you play someone like Simple? Because if you think about this interview, one of the things about your perspective and a lot of your teams is it was about the team approach. Like how collectively do we do it? So like you said, except for maybe Trace and then maybe a bit of Device and Ziwu now, you haven't tended to have the like hard carry player, like you say, who just has to get the 30 frags and goes crazy. So what do you think the approach to playing against someone like that is? Like how do you try and battle what they're doing?
I think what we did in Astralis, it was definitely more difficult and more challenging in Vitality, but that was also, the language barrier. We had a lot of struggling a lot with our own play as well, and we didn't have that proper time to sit and actually just prepare against our opponents. We had to focus on so many things ourselves. But if we go back to Astralis, I mean, we always looked at how is the rotation patterns from Simple and Ziwu, and what do they like to do, and are they moving around a lot on the map? Are they not? And we put a lot of focus into the play, and then we either we just avoided them, map wise, we focused a lot on B and those two, for example, or mid B splits or whatever it is, or just rushing long. If you knew that the Orber was on A, back then it was a little bit more, it was only Device pretty much moving all around the map. It was not like a kjaerbye, where you can never actually rely on where he was, except that he will not be on the same place twice.
Sure.
But in that sense, it was just either focusing a lot on them, making sure you shut them down, not feeding them as well, talking the whole thing about not giving them eco frags. It was down to that level. If we know that Simple would always go mid on Mirage, we would never go mid in the full eco. Let's not give him a good start. Let's just, try and avoid him. And if we go, we are extremely cautious with our utility. We have good spacing. We make sure that we make no mistake. You don't want to have him, if he peaks with an orb, we don't get a repeak. Otherwise, we have had someone sacrificing, he dies to Simple, and then you have Device holding an ankle. So if he repeaks, which there is a good chance he will based on our preparation, Device would trade him. So, and I think we managed, at least in our prime, to shut down these big star players to some extent. Of course, they pop off because they're crazy.
Of course.
But you cannot. But I think we managed to hold them down to on a decent level, I would say.
I may not have the most supporters in the world, but the ones I do have are straight fire, and they include Matt Pugnaccio Rakula, Frisky, Ahmed Haju, Toucan, Tobias Bernasconi, Animosity, Tosh, Jensen Gore, and it always is a special thanks going out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my show? Do you want to see things I say on my Discord, little piece of straight fire I drop in the Patreon only channels, stories I tell people in the other ones? Do you want to ask a question in my monthly AMA? Do you want teasers? Find out who the next guests are for reflections interviews? Maybe you want to be one of those people who takes part in the long form discussion with me where we talk about whatever's on your mind in esports. Well, if any of those or more sound interesting, why not support me, put your money where your mouth is, and join the Illuminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.